So we have another Canadian citizen who was coming home and had a stopover in the United States and ended up having issues during his stopover. This time, it was with a First Nations Canadian, and they were asking for a lot more details than he expected. So we'll talk about this today. I also have a CBC article that talks about more snowbirds that decided to say no to the United States. I feel it's important to still mention these stories because it counters the narrative that snowbirds are still flocking to the United States. I know many of you watching this are just as flabbergasted as I am on why they still go. But I'm actually going to show you a Reddit thread from Florida, and you can see the title here, Snowbirds Suck. So I'm going to show you some comments from the average Floridian and what they actually think about the snowbirds. Today's backdrop comes from Douglas, and he took this in Banff at one of the ski resorts. I'm actually not sure which one it is because he didn't include it in his email. But if you're a frequent visitor of the ski slopes in Banff, maybe you can recognize which one it is. Thanks, Douglas, for sending this in. Okay, let's get to the first report.
The rest and relaxation of Harley Minakis' recent Costa Rica trip was shattered when he made his way back to Canada through Houston, Texas.
When I went through the customs, more or less, they picked me out right away.
From Gwich'in First Nation, Minakis was carrying a passport and other forms of ID, which he says used to be enough.
The word here is used to be. I have a Nexus. That used to be enough for me to get in. But we already have reports of Nexus holders also being detained as well. Things have changed, and that applies to First Nation citizens as well.
But he says federal agents wanted a blood quantum letter, an official document stating a person has at least 50% indigenous blood.
I shouldn't have any issues. I have my Indian status card, I have my tribal card, but I still have to prove to them blood quantum.
The Jay Treaty allows First Nations members to travel freely across the U.S.-Canada border, but the Assembly of First Nations is now warning members, pointing to reports of increased questioning and detention by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Disheartening that we have to be even releasing this travel advisory.
A lot of fear, concern, and anger right now. What we're seeing is and hearing is that there certainly is racial profiling going on, and so I wouldn't be surprised if Indigenous people from Canada also get swept up in these actions.
There have also been reports of Indigenous citizens from the US also having issues getting back into their own country. So the profiling is happening on both sides of the border. But I think this really emphasizes that even if you're going to go on vacation and you're not going to the United States, it's still a huge risk to have a layover in the US. And let's not forget that report I did a little while ago, where a flight, I think it was from Toronto to Winnipeg, had to do an emergency landing, I think somewhere in the US. I think it was Minnesota somewhere. Thankfully, I don't think any of those passengers had any issues, although some of them are traveling without passports. But my point is if you're going to be traveling south of the US, make sure it's a direct flight, or you have a connection somewhere outside of the United States.
The advice? Members should now carry blood quantum letters on top of other documents, says this chief.
ICE is targeting groups of people that would include First Nations and, asking for documentation from them. And so, again, deeply concerning.
After a couple hours, Minakis was able to get his letter from his band and traveled home. But his opinion of the U.S. has soured.
With this situation, I don't want to go back there.
Global Affairs Canada says it's aware of several cases of Canadians currently or previously in immigration-related detention in the U.S. It says consular officials can provide help to those detained.
You know what I don't understand? The First Nations have actually issued a travel advisory to the United States. Why hasn't our Canadian government done the same thing? It's pretty out in the open that it is tougher to get into the US, and obviously we know it's not as safe as it was before. I mean, hell, it's easier to get into and travel to China, and many other communist countries. I know most Canadians are using common sense right now, but it would be nice if our Canadian government put in an official warning on what's going on right now. So the moral of this story, no matter who you are, or what methods or passes or privileges you had in the past, it's best to avoid the United States on a stopover. I know it might cost more, and it might take a little bit more time, but I would much rather do that and have peace of mind versus risking it. Now moving on to the next report, these snowbirds decided not to risk it anymore, and have decided that Mexico is going to be their new destination. The first snowbird couple that they speak to is John and Sharon from Mississauga, and they told CBC Toronto that they started feeling apprehensive after years of wintering in Florida. They say there was situations where they felt like they weren't welcome. Even from a security standpoint, as a Canadian, we just didn't feel comfortable anymore. So what they did is they bought a place in Mexico instead. Moving on to the next Canadian couple, George and Tracy from Niagara Falls, Ontario. Now, George and Tracy, they were basically ahead of the curve because they started noticing things in 2022 and sold their property long before the Orange McNugget got back in the office. Tracy says, "We knew after the first administration that this was not going to be pretty, and we knew Orange McNugget was going to get in. We knew we had to get out." Man, talk about making the right decision. I mean, if you think about it, 2022, Biden was still in the office, and I'm sure many Canadian snowbirds were still looking to buy in Florida. Except George and Tracy saw the writing on the wall, and they were going the other way. I'm also certain, too, that they probably had an easier path to selling their property than any snowbird does right now. Because I've done previous reports on snowbirds who are now actually struggling to be able to sell their property, mainly because they're competing with like hundreds of others at the same time. So well done, George and Tracy. Now this right here is the reason why I feel it's important for me to keep repeating this. Because the Canadian Snowbird Association is trying to downplay and say that many snowbirds are still going, at least their members. But I'm very happy that this CBC report does state their results might not be indicative of the snowbirds in general. And according to Stephen Fine, the Snowbird Advisor president, he's basically saying that it's not that big of a drop when compared to overall travel to the US by Canadians. Now, do you believe him? Or do you believe he's trying to save his business? I'm here to speak up for those snowbirds that have decided that they're done with the United States. Because if I was a snowbird and I read this, I would feel a little bit insulted, to be honest. So I'm speaking for John and Sharon and George and Tracy, who are doing their part and saying no to the United States. Now the article moves on to another couple, Janice and Don, who are from Niagara-on-the-Lake, and they've also moved to Mexico, and they say they have no regrets on making that decision. They love the culture there, and it's totally different than back home. But here's the thing that I find ironic. George and Tracy said they actually feel safer in Mexico than Florida. And that was due to Florida's open carry gun law. They lived in a gated community in Florida and only left to go to the grocery store, and that they knew where all the exits were every time. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound relaxing to me. When you go on vacation, or if you're spending time somewhere just relaxing, you don't want to have to worry about like where the exits are, or whether or not someone carrying a gun has the safety on. I mean, look at these photos. Why do you need guns to get some fast food? I don't understand it, and this is probably for a completely different video. But my point is that when you're going out on vacation, you don't want to have to see things like this. Which is why it's ironic that they feel safer in Mexico than they do in the United States. Now, at the end of this article, it states Canada's travel website includes a warning for Mexico, advising travelers to exercise high degree of caution due to high levels of criminal activity and kidnapping. If I didn't tell you what country that was, I'm 100% sure you would think it's the United States. So yeah, what's going on, Canadian government? Why are we not issuing one for the US? Anyways, moving on to the next topic and still related to snowbirds. There was a report I did a little while ago. It was from a CBC Radio 1, I think. I think the interview was with Matt Galloway, and he interviewed a few snowbirds. One person was against going to the United States and basically said he's done with them. And the other person, Joan, was basically boasting that the US citizens that are surrounding her are actually apologizing to her for what their administration is doing to Canada. And she also said that the grocery store clerks and whoever else she deals with say they're all happy that she's back. You know what? I suck at storytelling. Why don't I just play the clip for you guys? I found it. And it might be good for those who are new to my channel as well.
Tell me about those issues. You told our colleagues in Moncton that earlier this year you had some uncertainty about returning back to Florida.
I think everybody did. There was concern about going across the border. You hear horror stories. Our entrance to the United States was absolutely flawless. Excuse me. No problem whatsoever.
I'm just going to call a spade, but I'm going to guess you're white, right, Joanne? Because if your skin color is not the right color, they're not going to have the same experience as you. I'll just reference the first report I did in this video.
And last year when we left in the spring, I think there was a bit of concern as to what the feeling was going to be of fellow Floridians that were here, what the American people might feel. But I have encountered none of that at all. In fact, I've laughed and said for Canadians, we're always telling, historically, we get teased about the fact that we say, oh, we're sorry. We're always saying we're sorry. That has changed now. it's the Americans who are saying, sorry, sorry, sorry. And that happens on a frequent basis. I've had clerks come out from behind counters in stores that I've visited over the past 12 years and hugged me and said, I'm so happy that you're back. Thank you for coming back. We're so glad you're here.
Wow, she's so confident. On a frequent basis. Well, Joan, I'm here to burst your bubble. Because what you're seeing on the screen right now is from Floridians who say snowbirds suck. Let me read out the first line to you. I'm so beyond done with snowbirds and Canadians. SWF Southwest Florida, I'm guessing, is an absolute shit show right now, and I'm counting the days until their old senile asses head back north. The entitlement is unreal. They buy up houses in our communities, drive like they're the only ones on the road. Seriously, how do you suck at driving that bad? And treat locals like second-class citizens. And I'm tired of the we need their tourist dollars argument. Now, I'm not going to read the rest of his message. It's just going to anger most of the people. But does this sound like it's aligned with what Joan said? That everybody is apologizing and everyone is welcoming her back. This is why a reality check is really needed. No matter what report we see, whether it's from CBC or CTV or even from the United States, saying everything is fine and dandy, it's not. Sure, there are plenty of US citizens that do support Canada and would love to have us there. But there is another dark side, and I'm showing it to you right now. I'm pretty sure this person, whoever posted this, most likely despise all Canadians in Florida. And I'm 1,000% sure he's not the only one. In fact, I would say there's probably millions of them that feel the same way. I've seen the argument all over social media saying that they hate Canadians because they're buying up all the property, or that we're boosting up all the prices. If I was a snowbird, I would not want to be in the same city as this person. Someone you might be talking to might actually be this person, or somebody that feels the same way. They might not say it to your face, but that's probably what they're thinking underneath. But the sad part to me is how much support and encouragement this thread is actually getting. There's hundreds of people replying in the same response and the same feeling. They hate the snowbirds, and they want them gone. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, because all of us watching this video right now are in agreement that we're never going to spend a dime in the United States again. But it still frustrates me when I see people still going to the United States, or anytime I hear Joan saying that everybody is apologizing to us. Sure, there are some people that are, and many US citizens in my comments are even apologizing, and I do appreciate that. But there is a darker side that we can't forget about. And for me, the fact that I know these people exist, that they don't want us in their country, I'm fine with spending my money elsewhere. I know the haters are going to say I've beaten this topic to death, but it serves as a constant reminder to me that our friends that we used to think were friends may not have been as good friends as we thought they were. Now I want to end this video on a lighter note. As you might have noticed, the co-host has been pretty quiet today, and there's a reason for that. But before I get into why, I had a good conversation on the Discord server with some of our community members, and it was kind of funny because the co-host actually contributed. We actually talked about her in the server. And you can see here, she's actually looking at a picture of her that I posted on the server. Okay, maybe not her, she's actually looking at the mouse cursor. But the reason why she's been so quiet today is because she's not around. She's stuck in a bag, like a paper bag. I thought about helping her get out of the paper bag, but then I thought, you know what? I think I want to do a video without meowing in the background. So that's where she is today. But not to worry, she'll most likely be back during my next video. And for the record, she does this all the time. So no cats were harmed during this video. If you found any value in anything I said today, or you want to hear more from a Canadian perspective, help my channel out by hitting the like and subscribe button below. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.